Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Mountaineer Locker Room. Then and now, I'm Greg Christ, along with my great friend, Mr. Frank Fear. Frank, appreciate you being in here tonight and all the work you do for the show. Um, another week closer to football season.
We are counting the days, aren't we? But thank God for the extended baseball season, Greg. We enjoyed that until the very end.
Yep.
And, I'll tell you, Coastal Carolina won again. Could Coastal Carolina win the NCAA baseball championship? It may well be a Coastal Carolina LSU final. So best of two out of three. That would be unbelievable.
Yes, it would. And my good friend Gary Griffith, I'm not sure if you know Gary or not, but the last run Coastal made, Gary was the play-by-play man on a radio broadcast for the Chanticleers, and of course Gary was also the play-by-play man for the West Virginia Miners at that time. He and I got to be pretty good friends, close friends, and I know he's excited about it. And well, as an amazing run by those guys, and it's like he and I talked back then. I remember, and I don't remember the exact year. It's been 6 or 7 years now, but um, I remember us talking about Coastal and people saying what a Cinderella story, et cetera, et cetera. But if you look back at the history of Coastal Carolina baseball, that's no Cinderella story. They're good, and they always have been. And that year was no exception. They were just a heck of a baseball team, and they're usually really, really solid. And so I don't think it's a Cinderella story, and wouldn't surprise me one bit if they don't wind up in there again.
Yeah, I'll tell you, a former student of mine is for years was on the county board of supervisors down there, so he would keep me up to date about what's happening at that school. Unfortunately, Murray State went out another Cinderella story. Went out in two games,
Yep.
but what a story! That coach does everything, including mowing the lawn, the grass at the stadium.
Yeah.
And it's in a world that is so much about money. It's great to see a team like Murray State that basically has a fraction of the budget that the big schools have, the power schools, be able to compete on the field, and that's really what sports obviously is all about. That sometimes gets displaced. In fact, increasingly gets displaced by the dollar sign.
Yeah, and we've talked about this too at length, and that's the settlement, the house settlement, when all that comes into play and starts kicking in. And one of the big fears that most of the experts, and I'm not talking about myself, but most of the experts have pointed out is the fact that a very real possibility that a lot of these places, like Murray States, are going to have a hard time. Um, even fielding teams, and there's a possibility that these teams will have to cancel out sports just to be able to compete or play in another sport, particularly football. And there's the fear that these Cinderella stories, if you will, are going to go by the wayside because they're not going to be able to field teams. And when you look at those budgets, I know you sent out a graphic of the budgets of these teams, in the NCAA in that final grouping. It was unbelievable the difference, say from an LSU to a Murray State, and there's going to be those disparities, obviously, but right now the way it is, they still every now and then can compete and get in and have a shot, and you worry about when the money hits and these disbursements start going out. How teams like this are going to be able to sustain and keep their programs intact and be able to compete. So I don't know I don't know what's going to happen to those programs. And you look now, and in my mind, a lot of people say, well, but there's always this parity has come about because of the transfer portal, et cetera, et cetera. But when this disbursement comes into play, it's going to help. I think schools like WVU, maybe a Pitt. It's going to help schools like that to a degree, um, like in basketball. But still, yet your Murray States of the world are still not going to have the financial means to draw in those players. So those stories are not going to be as frequent, I don't think. I think there may be some more parity because of the transfer portal right now, but when the big money starts to play, it's going to be the big money people that are playing, and that unfortunately is that's just a matter of fact, and it's kind of, I don't know. You want to see some semblance of normalcy come to it, and some calmer waters come to it, but at the same time, what's going to be what's going to catch the shrapnel from that? What's going to the outliers that are going to get trampled by it? So we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, great story with Murray State, and you hope to see more of them. I mean, I would love to see Coastal Carolina go all the way again. I think that would be exciting and probably good for college baseball. But I think it would be a fun thing.
Oh, you described it very, very well. It's increasingly the business side of the equation is becoming pronounced. And you're right, just because with the House settlement, and it's starts at 20.5 million, I think, this fall, it doesn't mean that all schools are going to be able to get the money out of their
Right.
budget, because this money comes out of the university budget. And the schools that have are the ones that are going to have the capability. My concern is that the schools that want to compete but aren't going to be able to have the money out of their budgets will turn to sources, particularly with the private equity firms and others that would lend them the money to be able to compete. But even if that doesn't happen, there are so many questions. For example, if fans have been following the news, the WVU just announced the establishment of what's being called the Gold and Blue Enterprise. And essentially what that is the West Virginia version of assuming responsibility for the nil oversight, name, image, and likeness. And what they're going to do is, and I think it makes a lot of sense, is they're going to start being very aggressive in terms of finding corporate sponsors who want to invest in players, helping players find the right match in terms of their corporate partners. And what's also interesting, Greg, that schools aren't going to answer this question the same way. And the question is, how are you going to distribute? How are we going to distribute that 20.5 million? And again, that's just a starter number for this year. Is it going to be equal or is it going to be distributed certain ways? In fact, there is a story, I presume it's valid, by one of the beat writers that basically said that it looks like WVU will make it 85-15 in terms of distribution among current athletes. 85% would be for football, men's basketball, and women's basketball, and roughly the other 15% would go to the rest of sports. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. It could be another percentage. And, talking about money, it just certain things you assume this is the way it is. Why would you change it? But one of the things that's changed, you may know this, I think we may have talked about this, and that is the ACC has put up its conference revenue sharing so that I think it's a 60-40 model. Basically, 60% of the revenues that are distributed by the Atlantic Coast Conference will go to the schools that have the most eyeballs on them in terms of their media presentations. And you don't have to be beyond about sixth grade if you follow sports to know that sounds like Florida State, sounds like Miami, sounds like Clemson. I'll tell you, it ain't Wake Forest. Right. And except for basketball, it's not going to be Duke, and probably won't be North Carolina or Virginia, maybe. But if you look at the ACC, like the Big Ten, like all the conferences, Big 12 is the best in terms of top to bottom equality. But if you look at the Big Ten, you look at the SEC with Mississippi State juxtaposed with Alabama. But that's new. Honestly, I never expected to see that. I just assumed it would be forever the way it's always been. In other words, you got 10 schools or 16 schools or 20 schools. We just divide it equally across the across the players, but players being the schools. But that's
Right.
not the way it is. So it is a brave new world, and it just reinforces what Tony Baltimore told us a couple of weeks ago. And he said, for you people who think that the House settlement is going to settle everything, guess again.
Yep.
Just guess again.
Yeah, I think I think what's going to happen is it's going to open Pandora's box to more litigation, and you know that 60-40 thing. I think that's just more evidence that the rich and powerful want to be more rich and more powerful. They don't want to share, and again, it's going to just negatively impact these lesser teams, if you will, and yeah, that was a kind of a shocker. I never dreamed that they would. Well, first of all, put that out there publicly. I mean, I'm sure somebody would have known, but it's like almost like uh, bragging about it. This is what we're going to do, and the obviously the ones that have the more eyes on them are you know the historically better programs. Well, what's that do? It keeps the better historically programs intact, and it gives them more fuel. And I don't think that I don't remember who it was we had on the show talked about how the impact on these bigger schools is not going to be as a lot of people think that it's going to level the playing field out to where everybody basically has the same amount to spend. Well, you still have donors, and I don't remember who it was said basically you're not going to get rid of those donors. You're not going to get rid of those billionaires that like to help the programs, and that money's still going to be there. So your Michigans, your Texas programs, and those that have the big backers, they're not leaving. They're still going to be there, and they're still going to be putting money into it. So, this house settlement, uh, you know, kind of puts a cap on things, but uh, in terms of NIL, it doesn't. And that could be done a lot of different ways. And um, it's like leaving the fox in the hen house when they say, well, they're going to police their own schools as far as the NIL is concerned. Well, you know how that's going to work
Yeah.
out, and so I don't know even what to think anymore. It's just gotten,
Oh,
I mean, every day there's just something different and something new or something we didn't think about that pops up. And you're like, gosh, never thought of that. Now this could happen, or this could happen, or this could happen. But I think you and I both agree that the negatives in the end are going to be loss of programs, loss of sports in general for like women sports and that sort of thing. So that I think you get Title IX coming into it with litigation there. You think, well, I'm a WU football fan. As long as football and basketball programs survive, I'm happy. Well, but as a WVU fan, I often think about like the rifle team, for example. It consistently wins the national championship in the rifle contest. Have I ever watched one? No. But am I happy? Am I happy that West Virginia wins the national championship? They go right. I am.
sure. Yep.
And I'd hate to see, you know, something negative happen to that program where it wasn't
Yeah.
competitive anymore or didn't exist. And I think that's a big concern that fans need to have is, these lesser sports, these women's sports, the Olympic sports, basically, is what we're talking about. And when you hear the money difference, um, the disbursement difference, I get that. I can understand that. That's where your money is made in those major programs. But then, when you talk about these other facets of it, you do start to worry about your other programs, especially in smaller schools that don't have that revenue backing. And Frank, while we're talking about that, I know one night, and again, I don't remember the guest, may have been Tony, I'm not sure, but we were talking about different revenue streams and that sort of thing, and how the universities paid for programs. And we talked about the WVU medicine and the contributions it makes. Am I understanding that correctly? I don't know if you remember that particular discussion or not, but we talked about the growth of WVU medicine and where it's spreading out all over not only West Virginia but Ohio, and Pennsylvania, and down in the southern part of the state as well. Um, and the southern borders. And maybe I misconstrued what he said, but um, I took that as him saying that there's an effort, by WVU, not specifically, but an effort by WVU to expand that to increase the revenue, so that some of that money can be filtered out into different areas, like athletics, for example.
Well, yeah, absolutely, it was Tony, and I guess I would just put a footnote on it. It's not as though there's a direct line relationship between WVU medicine or any program to the athletics, but what it boils down to is that is one of the most, probably the most lucrative in terms of revenue generation. I mean, when you think about it, and it also applies to academics, the academic programs that can generate revenue, like medicine, engineering, et cetera. Uh, that's an advantage these days in relationship to programs like philosophy, English, foreign languages, which are more along the lines of needing revenue that's generated. So, what universities are doing, they're finding every way they can to increase uh, the income coming in so that the university has more resources to be able to make the cuts all around, including athletics. The last time I looked, WVU, about 5 to 8% of the athletic budget comes from the University General Fund. WVU and other schools have already talked about with the House settlement, uh, either putting in place a student fee for athletics or increasing the student fee for athletics. The possibility, certainly, of increasing the university allocation. Again, we talked about it last week. The biggest myth is football pays for everything in the athletic budget. And the reality for years has been, except at a select set of power schools, football doesn't pay for itself. It needs a variety of sources. And when we'll link that back, Greg, to the ACC situation, because, on the one hand, you look at the benefit that we have with the Ren Baker, but let's say Ren Baker now is the commissioner of the ACC. What is he supposed to do? He's got four schools in that conference, the marquee brand schools: Notre Dame, Florida State, Clemson, and Miami. Several of those schools, Florida State and Clemson, have basically saber rattled for years, saying we want to leave. We're going to leave the conference. We're not getting our fair share. And Notre Dame continues even today. I think there was a news report out of South Bend, because the relationship between Notre Dame and the ACC is more of a dash line relationship. They're not a member of the conference when it comes to football, but they worked out a deal. And so, if you're the commissioner of the ACC, what can I do to make Notre Dame happy so they stay with us in football? And what can I do to make sure that Florida State and Clemson stay with us in football, and we can keep Miami happy? So one way to do that is to come up with this 60-40 plan. And then Notre Dame, their benefit is that they're always going to be in that 60%. Plus, they have their separate contract with NBC. So for them, it's a double thing. Yeah, we're going to stay for football. But today, head coach of Notre Dame said, well, we might join a conference in football. And all that does is just increases the churn. And so, it's always been tough for athletic directors. I've been doing research on WVU basketball, and even I had forgotten that it was like 30 years from the time that WVU left the Southern Conference back in the late 60s. They became independent for a while. Then, football stayed independent until it joined the Big East, but the basketball team joined various iterations of the Atlantic 10, and then they joined the Big East. But what we forget is, if you're an athletic director, WVU is not in a situation, let's say, Washington State in the old Pac 10 and 12, where every single school plays major college football and major college basketball. Well, the Big East was not that way. Toward the end, when WVU was involved in A10 basketball, only 3 of the 10 schools were played major college football. The rest, teams like George Washington, teams like St. Bonaventure, they didn't play major college basketball. But so when we got into the Big East, again, Georgetown didn't play major college basketball. Football. St. John's didn't either. And so here's West Virginia sitting at the table. Football clearly is the bigger revenue generator. But I think I may have mentioned this last week. At one point, Penn State, which had dropped out of the A10, then said, well, let's join the Big East. And they were voted down. They were voted down, and they were voted down, guess by who? The basketball playing members. St. John's, as I understand it, St. John's and Georgetown in particular, because they didn't want to, that Penn State, without a doubt, is the major athletic engine of the Northeast. Nobody even comes close to Penn State athletics, particularly football. So, the more you think it's settled, it's not. And if we think it was ever settled, the example I gave, is, and so, Ren Baker is dealing with what he has to deal with today. But back in the day, Jerry Schaus, Freddie Schaus was dealing with that. All the athletic directors back there, you name it, Oliver Luck, they were dealing with the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think back again, it was a little different than what it is today, obviously, but when Miami and Virginia Tech that left the Big East, it caused some waves. But everybody's like, hey, well, we'll fill in with somebody else. It'll be okay. Blah blah blah. That was going on years ago, and you think about Penn State, you just wonder, had they not voted Penn State out, what would things, what would they look like today? Would they have? A lot of this may have not happened. Who knows? Because when Penn State went to the Big Ten, that opened eyeballs, and I'm not saying it wouldn't have happened eventually, but I think that Big East probably would have stayed intact and gotten stronger had they joined. And it's hard to tell what the landscape might look like today. I'm not sure we'd had a Big 12. You might have had a merger out there of the Pac-10 and the Big 12. Who knows? Who knows ifs, ands, and buts. But it's amazing looking back at where we really didn't think about it a whole lot. The changing these conferences, rating teams and teams jumping back and forth to different conferences. We didn't think much about it back then because it wasn't so prevalent, but it did happen. And, it's always, like you said earlier, it's always about the money. I don't care what era we're in, it's about the money, plain and simple. And that's what it's going to be about moving forward, which is concerning because, when you think about the power players, the SEC and the Big Ten, if it remains about the money, then who's going to be in charge. And you hear things like this 60-40 split where, you're saying, to heck with these other guys. We got to keep these elites happy.
That's right.
That may be a trend all over the country at some point. The good thing for the Big 12 is I don't know that you have what you consider 4 or 5 elite schools up here and then the rest down here like you do in the ACC or the Big 10 or the SEC. That's to me a pretty bold step. And if you're some of these other teams, the Wake Forest, and I think they look at that and say, well, what options do they have?
That's right.
Where are they going to go? We'll give them a smaller slice of the pie, but what are they going to do about it? And which I think fractures your conference and that may end up hurting them in the end. And we'll talk some more about this, Frank. I know the viewers are probably wondering, where's this guest? We don't want to listen to you guys. We have a guest to talk to. However, the guest tonight's scheduled, the runaway beer truck, as he is known throughout the state of West Virginia and the country, has apparently run away, and we can't find him. He got on the back of a beer truck, and we haven't seen him since. So
That's right.
Owen Schmitt was scheduled to be with us tonight.
We're filling in. I mean, we're filling in. We're waiting for Owen, and if he comes, we'll welcome him with open arms, and if he doesn't, we'll try again, as they say. But I was going to say something about this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, if he don't show up, okay, if he don't show up, Frank, I'll do like what Dave Gorbier used to do when I played my 3 questions game. I would always tell the participant that if they didn't answer the questions in 30 seconds, we sent Dave Gorby to the house to crack some kneecaps. So I'm going to assign that job to you. If Owen don't show up, and work him over a little bit for not showing, for stiffing us tonight. Well,
what we may have in that case is the runaway fear truck, because I'll be running the other way. But the thing is that I'm glad we're having this conversation, because it brings something to mind that I think is important for fans, is that we get so riveted on what's happening on the field. And we're going to talk a bit in a few minutes about the 2025 Mountaineers, particularly in terms of the skill positions, starting with quarterback and running back. But we have to look at games, particularly monumental games, and also think about what was going on the business side. An example of this, we're going to be celebrating we are celebrating this season, the 50th anniversary of that. And we had him on the show, the great Bill McKenzie kick that won the West Virginia Pitt game at the old Mountaineer Field in 1975, right? The backstory and why that victory was incredible is that the back scene was Johnny Majors coming to Pitt from Iowa State. In fact, I was at Iowa State at the time. Johnny Majors was the coach. He leaves and comes to Pitt. And basically what he says is, I don't like the deal that you have, Big Four, being Penn State, Pitt, Syracuse, and West Virginia, in terms of the numbers of scholarships. Whatever, it was, I can't remember the number, but I can't win. I can't make national noise with that, with the number of scholarships there. We're going to increase to like 95 or whatever it was. And so he went out and just brought in and stockpiled players to the point that Pitt, which was a horrible program, and that's not just criticism, that's just reality. We've had Dave Havern on the program, who was the engineered that great Pitt win in 1970. And, he would go back to his alma mater and say, woe is us. And Johnny Majors comes and loads up the truck, talk about trucks, with football players. And that's the team that waltzed into Mountaineer Field that day. And West Virginia, that still played by the rules, basically beat them. And so it wasn't just a great victory, but if you think of the context, it was a monumental win. And I hate to put it this way, but it was also David against Goliath with Tony Dorsett. And if you talk with the guys who played in that game, and we've talked to a number of them, they may not have had the numbers. They may have not had the same number of skilled players and All-Americans, but boy, did they have strategy, did they have really good coaching, did they figure out a way to be able to, in fact, there's just talk to any of the defensive players on that team, and they will tell you almost a thick book on how they were going to stop Tony Dorsett. And they did. And so that was a great victory for West Virginia, not because we beat our arch rival, but the circumstance associated with it. And of course, that team is going to be honored at the TCU game at the end of October. And but I will tell you that was a monumental win because of the backstory. So there's always a business side of the, where ADs or conferences or whatever coaches are trying to take advantage of whatever system that exists. And Ben Schwartzweiler, who was a WVU grad, who was a head coach at Syracuse and West Virginia, basically held hands and tried to wall off Pitt. But at the end of the day, it didn't work. So you had to beat them on the field.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think to a degree, we're kind of getting back into that type of a situation now. Not necessarily with scholarship numbers or anything like that, but you look at us opening the season with Penn State, for example, and look at the program they have and the team that they have, and it's like you said, David versus Goliath, and it can be done, and it has been done, and it will be done again in the future. Uh, uh, Before we move on with that, though, Frank, I don't know if people got the level of that joke you just told about the runaway fear truck with your dog being here. That's beautiful. I love that. But anyway, we seem to be always the David in these stories, unfortunately, and um, I think looking at the way things are progressing right now, and you don't, we I think we try to hope this doesn't happen, but if you look at what's going on and you look at the programs, for the last golly, what 10 years, it's been it's been Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Penn State. The same teams over and over and over. There for a long time, you had teams out of the SEC, Florida was always a dominant team. LSU, those type of teams. But here in the last 8, 10 years, it seems to have been basically the same teams, and I think you know that's a trend. Unfortunately, I think it's going to continue, maybe even get worse. I don't know that. And they talk about expanding the playoffs. Well, even when they talk about expanding the playoffs, they're talking about you know this conference getting X number of teams, this conference X number of teams. You other two conferences, y'all get this team, this many teams. What are you going to do about it? So you're not only seeing it in the revenue types of things, but you're seeing it in the way they're trying to control even the playoff system, and to the average fan looking at it like myself, I say, well, you don't rank teams until 5 games into the season, and then at the end of the season, if you're going to have 16 teams in the playoffs, you take the top 16 teams, you know, and I know that your whatever you call those Power Fives or whatever the smaller schools are, I know that's going to hurt them. But if you want a 16-team playoff with the best teams, put the 16 best teams in it. It doesn't matter what conference you're playing in, and I think most fans, even SEC fans, probably feel that way. And you may have one year where you have 7 teams out of the SEC. If that's the best teams,
Yeah.
that's the best teams. I don't understand this fray about we're going to get 4 teams in no matter what. This conference is getting 4 in, you're getting 2, these are getting 2, and then we'll take 4 at large. I don't understand that. I mean, why even have rankings? Why go through all that if you're going to do it that way? And but I think that's again part of the power move. It's about
It
part of the
is.
power structure, and so it's just the way the power structure is set up. And I think when it comes to the revenue, everybody will have that amount that they have to disperse, but that doesn't mean that if Ohio State has a chance to land the best quarterback in the country, that they're not going to spend the money to do it, no matter what their revenue is.
Oh, you're absolutely correct, and I'm glad you brought up the college football playoff because we thought the prevailing wisdom or thinking was that we were close.
Yeah,
We know the SEC and the Big Ten preferred one model, the Big 12 and the ACC preferred another, but it's now fallen apart, and so we're back at the square one. I think that was announced today or yesterday.
yeah,
So again, if you're a conference commissioner or you're an athletic director, just when you think things are settled, they become unsettled because everybody's looking for an advantage, trying to gain. Not, I wouldn't say game the system, but contour the system so it's to our advantage.
yeah,
And it's amazing to me, as Tony said a couple of weeks ago, that sometimes when he hears conference commissioners and coaches talk about what they believe is to their advantage, he doesn't have a dog in the fight. He's saying that doesn't make much sense to me. Um,
yeah,
so we're in a situation where it's it is a brave new world. There's absolutely no question about that. And it's just, for us, it obviously, like we're doing tonight, it leads to endless conversations about
Exactly.
circumstances because you just can't predict from one week to the next what's going to happen. And will there be a super conference? Will the SEC and the Big Ten leave the NCAA as they've been talking about? There's some talk about regionalizing again, but money's going to make it work. The
Yeah.
media is going to be the straw that stirs the drink, and uh, it's just we'll just see what happens.
And again, I don't remember if it was Tony or who it was, but we were discussing the playoff system and the idea of having, Big 12, Big 12 ACC with two teams, Big 10 SEC with four, I think. Um, and whoever we were discussing it with said, really, the Big 12 um, probably will be in favor of this because chances of them getting two teams in otherwise are not good. But I disagree with that. I think if I'm the Big 12 commissioner and they say you're only getting two, and I'm like, wait a minute, why does the SEC get four and we only get two?
Yeah,
Makes no sense to me. If they don't have four of the best teams, why are they getting four teams in? I don't. I didn't agree with that, but I mean, I understood what he was saying is the fact that when you go to the Big 12, you don't really have dominant teams that stand out. Uh, to where you have a possibility of uh, having four of the best teams in the country in there. I understood what he was saying in that regard, but you don't know that, and you don't know when that might happen. And I just think again, if you're going to have the best teams, and you get the best teams, and I
yeah,
don't care what conference you're in, and I'll keep tooting the horn too for the regionalization. I still think, and I mean I'm no financial whiz. To look at my checkbook, I'm no football expert or anything like that. But as a fan, I'm looking at this based on the NFL model and based on the revenue that the NFL has brought in and how that revenue year after year after year after year just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. They're doing something right. They figured something out. And why the college football programs wouldn't want a model like that where that revenue was going to just explode. I think if you go to that NFL model and you regionalize things, I think the TV networks would absolutely love that. The fans would absolutely love that. Your donors would love that. I just think that the revenue that could be created from having the regional setups and having those matchups week in and week out would just be phenomenal. And then also your question of your playoffs, your championship are settled because you take your division winners, you take your wild card teams, however you want to do it, based on that NFL structure, and then you've got a playoff of deserving teams, the best teams in the country, and they got to play their way in there. I just think that would be an excellent model, and I think the revenue uh, would be better than what they can come up with now. With the way they're talking about doing things, I just think if you have everybody included and you have a model that everybody understands and where everybody has a chance, and you have your regional rivalries back in place, I think everybody would be happy with that. And I
yeah.
think
In fact, I should have said this last week when it came up. You're absolutely correct, and you can make that argument simply from a fan's perspective. Is that how great it would be if West Virginia is playing Pitt, Penn State, Syracuse, Virginia
yep,
Tech, Maryland, etc.,
yep,
Boston College,
yep,
the rivals. You can travel to those games. Their fans can travel easily versus playing Iowa State, TCU, where there really isn't a lot of connection. There's no historical connection, and there's not a rivalry. But remember what for those people who saw the show with Jed Drenning. Um, Jed, who's very smart, was an all conference. I think he's in the Hall of Fame at Glenville. And then obviously the work he does with Mountaineer Sports, WVU Sports. His argument, not argument, he basically said that's what the NFL did. Pete Rozelle inherited an NFL model where the media rights were being tightly held by a few teams.
Yeah.
And they were unwilling to give up those media rights for obvious purposes. They believed that, why should I give my piece of the cake up? Well, the argument he made, and it took a long time for Pete Rozelle to do it, your piece can be bigger. It'll be bigger if we nationalize this. And as you said, I mean, those divisions are primarily regional, with some exceptions, but the NFL model is that way. And his promise was, if we play our cards right, we can increase your slice, rather than believing that everybody wants to watch the New York Giants. Well, if you're in New York, you do. Everybody wants to watch the Bears, and so you get to watch your team play the Bears or your team play the Giants. But the rest of it, there wasn't a national model. He got it through, and we don't have that kind of leadership. The leadership in the Big Ten and the SEC is strong, and it's not as though that when you think of the Mara family with the Giants, that was not weak leadership, but he was able to get them to see that they can grow the game more as being a collective than basically just having a few teams basically control the action. But you've heard me say this, I've said it before. I think the only person who has the background capability and the respect to lead something like that is Nick Saban. I don't think there's anyone close to Nick Saban who would be able to do that, because he's been there, he's done that. He's coached in the MAC at Toledo, Big Ten, Michigan State, SEC twice over at LSU and at Alabama. Won all the way. Every stop he won. And he has a lot of respect, and he doesn't pull punches. He'll shoot straight. We need someone like Nick Saban to say, look, folks, let's put partisanship aside and answer the question, what's best for the game? Not what's best for you and your game on your campus with your fans, but what's good for the game writ large. But I don't see any evidence, Greg, that's going to happen, but we can hold out hope, because I think it's the only way sanity comes back.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think about, not only what's best for the game, but I still am convinced that if you have everybody in this thing like we're talking about, and you have these regional setups, that overall there's going to be more revenue generated, more fan interest, and than what there would be if it continues the way it is now. Even for the SEC and the Big 12, or the SEC and the Big 10, I would think that overall the revenue is going to be better. I mean, if you're all in the same pot, and you're a TV executive, and you have the choice of showing West Virginia and Iowa State, or you have a choice of showing West Virginia and Penn State on the East Coast. You have Iowa State in the Midwest. You have UCLA, USC on the West Coast. You have Michigan State in the Northeast, or in the North. What's going to be better? And that Penn State West Virginia game is going to generate a lot of eyeballs. The Iowa State game over here is going to generate a lot of eyeballs. So you're going to get more, I think, as a whole, than you would if you like it is. Yeah, I just think the revenue would be so much better for everybody. I mean, even the Big Ten, the SEC would have more revenue, I think, if you did that model. But again, I don't know that it's all about. Well, I know for sure it's not all about what's best for the game. It's not all about money necessarily, but it's about power and control.
That's right.
And that's a big part of it too. And I think the SEC and the Big Ten want that power. They want that control, and that's going to be the hurdle that has to be jumped in order to get anything positive done for everybody.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. I've been checking my phone, and no texts or emails from the runaway beer truck. And so, well, let's talk about WVU football a bit. and
Yeah.
then we'll just it's a 10 to the hour anyway, so we've
Yeah.
had a full show. This has been a great conversation. Always great
Oh yeah.
talking with you,
Yep.
and so on. And I have to leave early because I just contacted my local T-shirt shop, and I'm going to have Runaway Fear Truck
That's great.
T-shirts. I'm going to get 100 of them printed. So
So I think we can do a lot of we can do a lot of things with that.
yeah, exactly. But
Marketing, marketing.
we haven't done as much previewing compared to what we did last year because of the nature of the game. But it's it's starting to settle down a bit, and I can almost sense reading articles from the beat writers. It's almost like this is getting close to being almost
Yeah.
normal again.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
really feel, we've had Keenan Cummings on for a couple of times, and he's just terrific. And oh, by the way, I just learned today, you may know this, we haven't talked about this. You may know this. It's always an issue for me, particularly with having Keenan on, because we want to support him, and he's part of the Rivals Network. Because I have a partial. I'm partial for On3 because they do such a great job with the portal. Well, what I learned today is guess what's going to happen? They're coming together. They're consolidating. As of July 1, on3.com and Rivals will be
Uh-huh.
one. And you know what that does is that, and this is the beauty of it, I think, is that I don't think anybody comes close to on3.com with respect to the portal. And I would argue that they're not as strong when it comes to high school recruiting, but nobody comes close to Rivals from my perspective. 24/7 is good too, but they do a great job with the freshman recruiting, the traditional recruiting, and so having the two together is really going to create a powerhouse, and also will allow us, I think, to get maybe more in depth with a single source to be able to turn to after July 1. That's huge news for those two
Yeah.
behemoths to come together and be one service.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too, and it'll be a lot better informative service, and um, basically eliminate a step. You look at it all
Yeah,
over again.
exactly.
Yeah, and they are both very good and very accurate, and do a lot of the legwork that we don't want to do or don't have time to do, and it helps a lot whenever you're reviewing. Um, these recruits and information about them, and the information you get
Yeah.
about them is phenomenal. And you may have never ever heard of them, but you can get to know them real quick. One thing, Frank, uh, and I wanted to ask you about this on that the article you sent on the ranking of the recruiting class. Um, I noticed it has at the top the average NIL value. I think
Hmm.
that's something that people may be interested in. Caught my attention, and I think on here the average NIL value for this recruiting class is $14,200. I think a lot of people have the misconception that these guys are being recruited and are being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to come to a place, and some of them probably are, and some of your bigger names may at some point get that much, but $14,000 to, as an average, is not much. Not
No, and
much
I
to be.
and I'm glad you brought that up because it's the reason why On3 designed the system they have. Because when you think about the portal, without NIL, you'd have a portal, but it'd be very
Yeah,
different from what it is because it's a market system and it's driven by money. That's why these players are jumping around. I mean, last week, we our guest talked about the Daniels, our quarterback, before his career was over, he played at four schools,
yeah,
and so I think that, and that's what On3 does. It looks at, well, who are the players out there that command the most money with respect to the portal and the movement in the portal if they declare for the portal, and you can see, this is where I think there's a parallel between that 1975 team and what they had to do to beat Pitt and what Rich Rod is facing this year. And that is he has to take his years of experience and be able to find, the diamonds in the rough to be able to compete because he's not going to be able. I mean, West Virginia is never going to be a Texas A&M, never going to be a Michigan, never going to be Ohio State, never going to be a Penn State in terms of the bankrolling that is available. And what's amazing to me as things began to settle down, and we were going to talk about quarterbacks and running backs, after all the activity, 50 players in and out in Morgantown, there's been number of 50 players have either left through the portal or have come in through the portal since the end of last season. Yeah. And as well as I, Craig, if Mark Parsons or Mickey Plumlee said, now take out a sheet of paper, write down the two names, and I'm talking about if they said this to us, not today, but if they said this to us last, I'm going to say December, January, early part of the portal movement, who's likely to be too deep at quarterback for West Virginia, and who's likely to be too deep at running back at West Virginia, we would write our names down. And I guarantee you, if either Mark or Mickey asked us to do that today, write it down. And then they said, now we want you to compare what you wrote in early January with what you wrote down today. I could tell you from my perspective, they'd be the same names.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Nico's going to be there and Jalen Henderson's going to be there at quarterback. Yep. And after all this time and all the movement, they're there. Those are the top two.
Yep.
It's just amazing.
Yeah. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. It shows you, it says something, I think. You're out there, you're mining, you're trying to get the best players. But what it also tells you have some pretty good players. Henderson came in early, and Nico was here, and the same thing at running back. I mean, early talk all about was it Ty Edwards from Northern Iowa as one of the early entrants from Northern Iowa, and also we had nobody's going to move Jaheim White, and those two names are there too.
Yep. Yeah, and again. And that's something I noticed looking at this. The players that we did lose, and I don't know the caliber of these guys, how good of players they were, etc. I do know that I didn't recognize many of the names. So you look at the people that we lost. We lost some players, I'm sure, that were good players, but overall, you look at the players we're counting on, and like you said, those two positions especially, which are key positions, obviously, it's pretty solid, and it stayed solid, and so I think that's encouraging. I think it's a lot better to bring in, through the portal. It's probably a lot easier to bring in, a good lineman, a good offensive tackle, than it is to bring in a starting quarterback. So I hope that's a good sign for WVU, and obviously the prognosticators don't think so, since they have us ranked pretty much last and everything. I think it's a good sign for us. I think WVU's going to be fine.
Yeah, and it's interesting because obviously if Nico becomes a starter, you have to replace him. So that could be Jalen Henderson. And if you look at Jalen Henderson, his numbers at Texas A&M, and you look at Nico Marchiol's numbers at West Virginia, they're almost identical in terms of touchdowns, yards. And on the running back side, what are you faced with? Well, you got a tremendous speedster in White, again, who was a diamond in the rough out of Pennsylvania and came in and really knocked the socks off of everyone. Same thing with Donaldson, came out of North Carolina, knocked the socks out of people. I think it's North Carolina, may have been Florida, can't remember. But you got to replace him because he left for Ohio State. So what do? They bring in Ty Edwards, who's 230 pounds.
Right.
So yeah. And the other thing that's interesting about this quarterback thing is last year when they had Garrett in, he's a righty, and then Nico comes in, he's a lefty. but both Jalen and Nico are lefties, which is going to make it a lot easier to game plan, a lot easier for the receivers because the ball's going to be coming out of the same hand, same arm, irrespective of whether Nico's in there or Jalen Henderson.
Yeah. Yeah, and just like you said, the replacement. I know the running back. I can't. I'm horrible with these names, but the big running back is watching
Ty
video of
Edwards.
him. Ty Edwards. Yeah, watching video of him, and it's almost C.J. Donaldson reincarnated. I mean, it looks eerily similar to the same guy back there. He's just a big dude, and you combine that, and I think we saw in the past. Uh, what a difference that can make when you have that big bruiser in there, and then you change it up with a speedster. What damage that can do, and I don't know if that was their thinking going in, but I think they've landed a good one there. And like you said about the quarterbacks, and there's a couple other guys in that quarterback room too that are, that are projected to be really, really, really good players. And I don't, again, not familiar with all their names. I think Wilkins, one of them maybe, and Fox possibly is a name there that's been mentioned a few times. Listening to Greg Hunter, who we had on the show not long ago, he was talking about some of these guys and how under different circumstances these guys could easily step into a starting role here, and
Yeah.
so that's encouraging. I think both the running back and the quarterback room are pretty strong. I think that might be the two strong points of the team, without a
Yeah,
doubt.
you're absolutely correct. And what I see in that quarterback room in particular, because you got to remember that Nico's a redshirt junior and Henderson is a redshirt senior. So they've
Yeah,
done a good job of bringing in freshmen, either redshirt freshmen now or fresh out of high school, that they can learn the system. Uh, they may even have an advantage over Nico because he doesn't have to relearn, doesn't have to learn a new system
right.
for when they need the next person up. And again, you never know with injuries. And the other thing is, and we'll talk about this next week, what you're seeing them do. I mean, I mean, I shake my head because in a way it's tragic. I mean, Virginia Tech is going to start an offensive line that they might as well have West Virginia Mountaineer jerseys underneath the Tech
Yeah,
jerseys. We lost another one just a couple of days ago to Virginia Tech. But the point
yeah,
is, when you look at the portal and you look at what positions are being brought in, you're seeing an awful lot of offensive linemen, and you're seeing an awful lot of wide receivers. I mean, we had a good core of wide receivers, but they were thin. I mean, we've got
yeah,
people like Bray and Fox and Gallagher. They're holdovers, but they brought in 8 wide receivers who have experience through the portal. And so again, I mean, whether you like Rich Rod, whether you believe that he should have been picked, what you can't argue about is the guy comes in with a tremendous amount of experience, plus he has savvy. This
yeah,
is a guy that has savvy. Um, and so he's the kind of guy you'd want in an alley at 2 p.m. if you got a bunch of drunks coming the other way. You want Rich Rod on your side. And so and he got a terrific defensive coordinator who was with him down at Jack State before he left for for Oklahoma. And so people just have to have faith. They have to have patience. But as we begin to look at the pieces on the chessboard that seem so scrambled, you're beginning to see, even for people like us who aren't in the game, you can begin to see some order coming out of it. And even some prognosticators are saying they don't buy that West Virginia is 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th in the league. This could
yeah.
be a team that surprises if it could get by Ohio in Athens, and if they can beat the Panthers in Morgantown, then you're going to have to start paying attention to WVU.
Yeah, we said this early on that him bringing in all these people, it like we were talking how crazy it was at the time, and you think back on that, it's it was kind of it was just
It
kind of
was.
odd. They brought in so many, but again, I think with Rich, obviously his goal is to fill needs, and with these the number of linemen you talked about, the number of receivers. I think the defense, we looked at that earlier on. We talked about that, how it was in pretty good shape and it looked pretty well intact. Defensive backs, obviously, we need some work there, and I think he addressed that. But then his focus, of course, he is an offensive minded guy. His focus was on that offense, and you had all these quarterbacks lined up. You had the running backs pretty much set once you got a couple guys in. Let's get linemen in here now. We need people to block for these guys. And I think, Rich has a certain kind of lineman that he likes. It's not the, it's the more athletic type of guys that can move and zone block and those type of things. And, I've had faith all along that he knows what he's doing. He's been around it long enough now. He's dealt with the portal long enough. Um, I think that was one of the demises for Neil Brown, was that it took him a couple of years to figure out how to use the portal, and and that was tough on him. And I think that Rich is got a grip on that, and hopefully, and I think that of course, I like it when they rank us low like this. I think that
Mhm.
I think it's a lot easier to come in with low expectations and overperform, if you will, than it is to come in with high expectations and underperform. I think it's better off that you're considered to be, number 15 or 16 or whatever it is they got us at. I don't think they have any way of knowing. I don't think that we have any way of knowing. But I think I've known Rich Rodriguez for a long time. I've watched him coach for a long time, and I know what he's capable of. And I have full confidence that we are not going to be a bottom feeder in the Big 12. And
Yeah.
this wouldn't surprise me at all that we have a really good season. It may not be, to most people, it may not be a great season because, again, I think people come in and they think, well, we're going to go undefeated with Rich Rodriguez. I don't know that that's a little bit too much to expect, but I think that we're in good hands, and I think we got a lot to look forward to. I think we're going to be fine. I think you see him again addressing things that we need, and you see things that are solid and in place. And I think that's encouraging, especially when you look at the positions that are solid, and that is quarterback and running back. And those are two of the obviously the vital positions on a team. And with Rich Rodriguez's teams, those are obviously the two most important positions, the running back and the quarterback. And, we seem pretty solid there. So, yeah, these prognostications don't mean anything to me. I don't pay much attention to those. But if I had my preference, I'd just assume they put us down toward the bottom or in the middle of the pack somewhere. That's fine. I
Hmm.
think it gives you a little edge and gets that chip on your shoulder. So
Yeah.
he'll use that for motivation, I'm sure.
Yeah. And as you were talking, it made me think about a conversation we had today when we had that, obviously the vacancy with Coach Brown being let go, and then we sort of braced ourselves for, uh, are we going to be able to keep our frontline players? And we knew pretty quickly. I mean, Donaldson going to Ohio State, and there are a whole bunch of folks. I mentioned earlier the folks who left for Virginia Tech on the line, lost a receiver to Illinois. But the list we were looking at today, since April 1st, the number of folks who have come to West Virginia from a Power Four school far outnumbers the number of players at West Virginia who went into the portal since April 1st and left for a Power Four school. I think there are only three. Uh, Gavin Crawford, another offensive lineman, we lost him to Virginia Tech. We lost Jack Samarco, a tight end, to Alabama, and we lost Makai Byerson, a defensive lineman, to Boston College. But we got Aiden Bussell, an offensive lineman from Tennessee, Carson Lee, another offensive lineman from Mississippi State, uh, an offensive lineman, another one from Texas. We got another player from SMU, and Josh. I hope I can pronounce his name correctly. Josh Asoa, an offensive lineman from Oklahoma. So what's interesting now, that's exactly the pattern that you want,
Yeah.
as it gets closer to the season and players are making their final moves in and out. How many players are you losing who are on your roster to Power Four schools, and how
Yeah.
many players are coming in from Power Four schools? And now that number is tilted toward coming to Morgantown rather than leaving Morgantown. And that's as we were talking earlier today, that's a very positive sign.
Yep. And to reinforce that, Frank, if you'll take a second to explain to the viewers the way the portal rankings are put together. I know a lot of people think it's us against the rest of the country in our rankings of the way our portal transfers have gone. But go ahead and explain that, if you will, to folks so they'll understand what the portal rankings actually are.
Yeah, what On3 does, and that's just On3. What On3.com does is it basically uh, ranks schools by their internal activity ins and outs. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of difference. So if I'll use a really a foolish example, if you have all 5-star players, you have 5-star players, and they all leave, and they're replaced by 5 2 and 3-star players. On3 is going to rank you lower nationally because the replacement value doesn't doesn't come close to what you lost. And
Right.
when you looked at, that's why when Rich Rod came, and I remember, and Mickey will be back with us in the fall, but I was saying, Mick, come on, it was on the show. You can go back and watch. I said, we're like 63rd in the country, and there are only 70, what, when you take the Power Four plus the Pac 10 schools and Notre Dame, I think there are only 69 or 70 schools. We're toward the bottom. Well, that's because the replacements we were getting did not come close to the quality of the players that we lost. I mean, Ohio State wouldn't want Donaldson if he
Right.
isn't, an All-America class player. So we lost players, but now what's happening is that with more time in the saddle, we're beginning to see that shift a bit, and as a consequence, we're moving up in the rankings, which I think just makes a lot of sense. And there's been a lot of news over the last 3 weeks. But I think, like so many things in life, after a while, you sort of become you just don't see it maybe at the same level that you would have maybe 2 months earlier because you just
Yeah.
deluged with. It's almost
Yeah.
like a bus station.
Yeah.
Buses coming in, dropping off people, and buses leaving, taking people on. But if you know what you're looking for, obviously I'm enthused. I've enthused, much more enthused than I have been in several months because I see the patterns, and you and I have talked about this, that I think really give us a chance.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think so too. And I think going down the road, if you look, you're going to lose players. I mean, that's just the way it is. You're going to lose players, but you're also going to get players. And I think if you have somebody at the helm, this is going to be another role that coaches take. And we've heard this. We heard it last week. The big role of head coaches now is fundraising. That's basically what they spend half their time doing is fundraising. I think you're going to have an engineer in charge that understands, we're going to lose some good players, but we're going to bring some good players in, and you got to keep the core together. So you're going to spend your money on that core and keep them in place, and then you're going to have some fallout from some other folks you're going to lose, but so you bring other people in to replace them of a equal or higher value, and I think Rich Rodriguez is understands that part of it, and I think he'll be good at it. And uh, you know, um, I also think there's going to be something to be said for liking to play for somebody. And I
Mm-hmm.
know Rich is has this hard edge to him. A lot of people see that, and they see sometimes him get a little bit crazy occasionally. But I think overall, if you talk to players throughout the years that's played for him, they love the guy, and I think that. I think we heard last week we had Chris on the show. He talked about what a super nice person he is, and how he'd do anything for you. Players respond to that, and I think that makes it easier to keep some players as well. So, I just and I know I'm you know Mr. Obvious. What's that guy's name? Captain Obvious. I say some of the things I say, but I'm also the eternal optimistic, and I think. I feel very optimistic about our future, and I think we're in good hands again with Rodriguez. And I think that I think this year we just again keeping those core people intact, and then you're going to have some fallout. You're going to have some incidentals. You're going to lose, but you bring in people to replace them that are equal or better value. And it's not always. You look at losing to C.J. Donaldson. Well, you did, but at the same time, I mean, and these coaches know what's behind them. They know who's in that locker room and who's not. They can look at each other and say, CJ's leaving, but we got CJ number 2 sitting over there waiting to play, and he really wants to play here, and he's anxious to play. So we're okay with that. You know what I mean? Not
Oh
not to
yeah.
say that they want to not get rid of him, but I'm sure uh, it oftentimes affects fans more than it does those guys because they know what they have in the wings and they know what they got with that person, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel pretty confident. I'm like you. I feel more hopeful, more enthusiastic than I have in a long time.
Yeah, and I would say well stated, Greg, as always. But just to go back to what Chris said last week, as you said, he said, okay, what reunion are you going to go to with these players moving
Yeah,
around? And,
yeah,
that just emphasized how important it is that Nico stayed and that
yeah,
Shaheem stayed. We
yeah,
would be having a different conversation if both of those people left. But both of
yeah,
those players, we as Mountaineer fans owe them a lot because both of them clearly could have been mobile, could have migrated to another program. Other programs would have been happy to take them, and yet we've got Nico there is either going to start or he's going to be in relief. I think he's going to start, and then there's no question Jaheim is going to be your number one runner and rusher, and he stayed, and so that's a very again another positive sign.
yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot of positive signs, and uh, you know, I, you don't know financial situations or anything like that, or the money exchanges or anything of that nature. But I still think there's something to be said for a little bit of pride in the program and wanting to play at a certain place, wanting to play for a certain person. I think some of that comes into play as well. So again, I think we're in a pretty good spot and looking forward to it. So I think it's
Hmm.
exciting, and
Yep.
and to be quite honest, if we can win 6, 7 games, I'd be thrilled. I think it'd be a success coming into what he came into and what he's had to do. I think it would be a success, and I think we will. I'm not going to give my predictions yet for the season, but I know I'll be spot on like I always was last year.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I
Well.
think my final record was like 2-12 or something like that. But
Yeah.
again,
We.
a lot of that comes from being so optimistic and so in love with the Mountaineers. I'll
Yeah.
pick them no matter what.
Well, I'll tell you, it'll be fun. We'll do the pre and post game show again this year, and it'll be fun watching these guys, a mixture of names that we know all too well and names that we're going to get to know. And,
Yep.
and the other thing we talked about before that's so important, if there is a positive thing from this portal, is that not only from a general perspective, in other words, it gives players a chance to participate in the market system, but it also gives an opportunity for someone like a Ty Edwards, who probably 10 years ago probably wouldn't have been able to go anywhere from northern Iowa because northern Iowa is not in the group of five. They're below
Right.
that. So as a
Right.
consequence, it gives him an opportunity because he rushed for 1,500 yards in 2 years to go someplace to play power football, and I think that that's a positive thing. So we're going to see some obviously guys who know Rich Rod's system because they played for him at Jackson State, and we're going to see them and other players. Not all of them. I mean, there was a player that we've seen D3 players who've come through, D2 players who looks like they're not gonna make the grade. And clearly, what I said earlier was individuals either advised to leave or decided to leave, and almost none of them, almost just a few of them, went to power schools. Others went to group of five or below schools, and so it's just going to be fascinating. It's going to be
Yep.
fantastic.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait. Looking forward to it. And again, you have to have a little bit of confidence in the fact that we have Rich Rodriguez at the helm. I just feel like
That's
that
right.
he's got a good grip and a good handle
Yeah,
on the whole situation. And I don't know, you have to anytime you have um, your quarterback coming back, and like you said, you got Nico coming back. If he's not the starter, that means there's somebody a little bit better, which is
that's right.
really because he's pretty daggone good. And
Hmm.
so yeah, I think like you said earlier, I'm excited. And I think I can't wait for that first
Yeah,
pregame. I'm going to do some homework this year so that I can at least pick 3 games right. I'm shooting for 3. I'm going to start doing some homework and do some research and study some film and
there
or
you
go by the fly by the seat of my pants. I
Yeah,
don't know.
Mickey whipped us. It's
Oh God.
he whipped us last year, man.
I'd like to see his notes on the games before the games. I bet you he was watching film and breaking stuff down. And I guarantee you, because that's a highlight of his year was beating us in that
Oh
one.
man, I mean, that contest
Not
was
that he,
over halfway
not that he,
through.
yeah, not that he mentioned it ever.
No, I know,
Every
but
time.
the amazing thing about Mickey, he was not only picking the winner, his scores were
Right on.
almost, I mean, it was like in some cases like 3 or 4 points off. But
Yeah,
yep,
every
yeah,
week.
that's
every
right.
week.
It's great.
And
Hey, I have
when
a
you
recommendation for a guest next week, Greg. You may not know him. I don't think you do. I don't think you've ever met him. But my recommendation for next week would be a guy named Owen Schmitt.
oh,
Um,
that'd be a great one.
you know, let's see if we can get him back. And I'm thinking the one way we might make it easier for Owen, since he's a busy guy, always on the run,
Yep,
is maybe do it by the old telephone method.
we
And
might have.
so we could just wherever he is, cell phone, whatever. I mean, he could be in who knows? He could be somewhere in Montana. We could call him up and talk with him.
I'm sure when I hear from him, there's going to be some long excuse about
Yeah.
working overtime or something. Something happened.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
well, it happens. Yeah, we've done this. We're blessed. We've done this now. I think this
Oh
is
yeah,
our 80th show or something, and it's the first time it's happened. And
yeah,
hey,
yep,
no
yep.
problem. Yeah,
Not a problem. We can handle it. So,
we
but
did.
yep, and we do have a guest next week, and you may want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I hope it's Owen.
Yeah, we hope, don't we?
Yeah, because the person that we thought
Oh, that's
we
right.
would
I'm
get,
sorry.
yeah, that's all right. We because of and it is summer. We have to realize that
Yeah, yeah,
people are on vacations, family, and all that kind of stuff, and so we really appreciate it that people are hanging in there. But our show, unlike a lot of shows, really revolves around our guests, and so
yeah.
we rely on folks to do that. But
Well, let's throw this out there, Frank. Let's have open auditions. So anybody that wants to be on, send us an audition tape, and we'll review it and get back with you.
yeah, I love that. That's a great
How about
idea.
you do have what is what I meant. So you got that promotion that we do at the end of the show. So before we get to that, I want to bid everybody a good night. We appreciate you tuning in and bearing with us and listening in, Frank jibber jabber back and forth. Hope you got a little something out of it. If nothing else, it'll help you sleep tonight. Maybe you might be in a coma by now after listening to us. But we do appreciate everybody for tuning in. We look forward to coming to you again next week here on the Mountaineer Locker Room. Then and now, brought to you by the Newer Network and the Voice College Football. So, Frank, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Frank Fear here from Mountaineer Locker Room Then and Now, and we're pleased to be part of the voice of college football national network. Mark Rogers and staff have done a great job with the network, and it's constantly adapting and expanding to bring content to you. Many of you are already following us on X and Facebook and Instagram. And if you're not, here are the URLs, the links to go to and take advantage of all the great content that's there for you. Even if you do that, you may not know some of the new doings at the Voice of College Football Network. One is a new podcast options that already thousands of people are taking advantage of. You can get it on Apple, Spotify, and other podcast networks, and we encourage you to do that. Perhaps the biggest drum roll is the new Voice of College Football website with plenty of content, everything that you want to enjoy and can enjoy about college football. And remember, one thing that makes the Voice of College Football Network different is that we're 24/7, 12 months a year. It never ends. It's college football in the winter, the spring, the summer, and of course, during the fall. We also want to announce, and Mark Rogers again and staff have done a great job with this, a relationship with Amazon.com. And here's Mark to tell you more about it.
You can make a difference here at the Voice of College Football. Use the Amazon link. Financially contribute to the Voice of College Football without spending a penny. Same shopping experience. It's easy. Go to any video on any channel. Go to the description section and grab the link right next to the capital letters that say Amazon. Use that link, and Amazon will instantaneously convert to your account, settings, history, everything intact, just like whatever link you use right now. No difference. Pay no attention to the product that you see right there. Just go search what you want. Don't forget the Amazon link. Thank you for your support. Sincerely, the Voice of College Football.
Well, that's it for now. Let me thank you for your loyalty. The Voice of College Football Network. This is Frank Fear for Mountaineer Locker Room Then and Now. Hope to see you on our channel and other channels, VOCF. Take care, everybody.